Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the PG Show, where we talk about all things college football. And today we have to talk about OU and their recruiting updates. But before we do that, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know what you guys are thinking down in the comments below. Where do you guys think OU will end up in terms of a class ranking for the 2023 recruiting cycle? All right, everybody, we got to get into it. OU has had some massive recruiting updates, and we have to talk about it. And we're just going to go ahead and start with their number one player in the class, Jackson Arnold. So Jackson Arnold is now ranked the number 14 player in the country, and he's the fifth best player, the fifth best quarterback in this class. And realistically, any of these quarterbacks going from Arch all the way down to Arnold and everybody in between could flip-flop as the best quarterback in this class. They all bring something different. And realistically, I think it's just based on the given day, and it's based on the team that really, really wants you. I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of the teams really wanted Arch. Was it because of the name? I don't know. We're not here to talk about that. But any of these schools that have any of the top 5 quarterbacks would have taken any of these quarterbacks that would have wanted to come to their school. And so Jackson Arnold, originally committing as a 4-star quarterback, now being a 5-star quarterback and jumping up the rankings, this has been a huge win for Jeff Lebby and this offense, having the future be able to come in. Jackson Arnold looks like a guy that has been a late bloomer. He looks to be continuing to develop. It would not shock me if by the end of the 2023 cycle, he is a top 7 or 5 player in the country. He could definitely be one of the top 3 quarterbacks in this class. All right, let's dive into PJ Adebawore. Recently, in the new 247 Sports Recruiting Update, he is now a 5-star edge rusher, and he is now ranked the 35th player overall in the country. And this is another big win for OU as they get their second 5-star in this class. I know OU fans are going to be really excited about this one. PJ definitely deserved it, and I definitely expect him to keep climbing up those rankings as he enters his senior season. This is a guy that definitely could end up as a top 20 player by the end of this cycle. But let's go ahead and let's talk about those guys that maybe don't have their 5th star, but could get their 5th star by the end of the 2023 cycle. And I think the two that have the best shot are Jacquez Pettaway and Caden Green. So they're right there on the border. They're right there on the verge of 5-star territory. Pettaway being probably the closest, and I think Caden Green, who has a 0.96 compared in the composite. If you had to break it out between the two, Pettaway is definitely the front runner here, but Caden Green's got a lot of talent. And especially in this class, there's not a lot of offensive tackles in this class that I would say just stick out. And a lot of people are falling, but then that means there's a lot of people that are rising too. And I think Caden Green is going to be one of those people in the senior season, especially if you watch his film, that has the potential, if he continues to just put the work in, he continues to hit that weight room, and he continues to work on his hands a little bit more, like he could definitely rise up there. I don't think he's going to make a huge jump, but he could definitely make a jump into 5-star territory. And I think to be a 5-star, you're going to have to be within the top 37 players. So they've got a little bit to go. Like I said, Pettaway being the closest. Caden Green's got a great shot as well. Also, talking to Samuel Omosigho the other day, just kind of chatting back and forth, he said he really wants to be a 5-star by the end of this cycle. That's his goal. Now, that would be great. I think, though, realistically, if he can get to a top 75, you can count that as a success. Samuel's a great guy. We've had him on the podcast. And I definitely think that we should expect to see him at least be a top 75 player. But if Samuel wants to go out there and get that 5th star, we ain't going to complain. Go right ahead. Now, and a couple other players that I think we should be expecting some really big jumps from in this 2023 cycle is Phil Picciotti, as he is now at IMG Academy, and then Eric McCarty, who just really seems to be getting his body ready for the college game. Additionally, you see guys like Derek LeBlanc and Jacoby Johnson, they could end this cycle as top 100 players by the end of this cycle. I think one of the big things is Derek LeBlanc plays with some pretty high level guys. And so if he continues to go out there and put up big numbers like he has in the past, you could see him make a pretty large jump. All right, let's go ahead and talk about just the remaining guys on the board for OU. And, who do you think we could realistically land? Who could we potentially flip? Because I know there's been a lot of talk about an OU flip miss out there. And then where could we end up on that recruiting class? All right, so guys that I expect OU to land: Makari Vickers and Anthony Evans. Those are pretty much for sure at this point. Like, OU should land them, assuming everything goes correctly. I don't think there's any question there. Now, there are a couple guys that OU is in the running for that would be huge additions to the team. And a couple of those guys are Jordan Renaud, which he announced his top two are Alabama and Oklahoma. Now, I think he is looking at making a commitment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be here at the end of this month. But he still is looking at taking OVs to Alabama later in the year as well. So if he commits to OU and he wants to take that official visit to Alabama later in the year, I'm kind of curious we all know how BV is going to feel about that, but I'm kind of wondering how that one's going to play out. We'll have to find out a little more. The other one is Tahusili Akana out of Utah, originally from Hawaii. He's another guy where a lot of people expect him to come to OU. Not a lot of crystal balls have been put in for him yet. I don't even think we have a commitment date set up for Akana. So he's a 4-star edge rusher. We already have Adebawore. So I'm not 100% sure if necessarily we need Akana. It would be great to have him, but I'm not necessarily sure we need him. And then you got a couple other guys in Malachi Coleman and then David Hicks. And I believe if we get Malachi Coleman, I believe we're recruiting him for the tight end position. I think some other teams are recruiting him for a wide receiver. So I think it's just going to depend on Malachi Coleman in whatever position that he decides he wants to play. I think that'll be a really big deciding factor on where he goes based on depending on, how the teams want to use him. It sounds like OU wants to use him as a tight end. And then you got David Hicks, and this has been somebody that a lot of people have been talking about, especially after the party at the Palace. It seems like OU made a lot of headway there. However, this recruitment's probably going to go well into the season, probably a November, December commitment, maybe even as late as January. Right now, you've seen Steve Wilfon. He's put in his crystal ball a while ago for Texas A&M. I don't think a lot of people know exactly where he's going to go yet. I'm kind of wondering why Steve Wilfon put a crystal ball in that early, especially if Texas A&M doesn't have as great of a year as everybody thinks they will. We've talked about it plenty before. I think there's a lot of guys on that defensive line class that they signed that could jump ship and transfer. And then you could also see guys like David Hicks decide that they're not going to go to Texas A&M. So that'll be pretty interesting. I know that's a recruitment that everybody's watching. I know as I'm recording this video, he has a pretty big post that he's going to be making later from what Hayes Fawcett is saying over on Instagram. I'm not sure what that is, so I could totally be eating my words over here, but we'll have to find out a little bit later. And then players that OU could be flipping. So there's been a lot of talk about Peyton Bowen and Ryan Yates. Those are two teammates of Jackson Arnold out of Denton Guyer. Peyton Bowen is a 5-star safety and Ryan Yates is a 4-star safety. Now, realistically, it would be awesome to flip both of them. I think you get one of them, and I don't think it's Peyton Bowen. It sounds like people that are close to Peyton Bowen want him to stick it out at Notre Dame through the season and see how things are going to go. However, it does look like Notre Dame is struggling a little bit in terms of recruiting, as they've had a couple decommitments, the biggest one being Keon Keeley. And so it would be nice. Peyton Bowen has been to Oklahoma several times. I think it's like a total of 7 visits since he's committed to Notre Dame. That's pretty big. You don't just visit someplace 7 times and then not go there, but I don't know. It sounds like Peyton Bowen's camp really wants him to stick it out at Notre Dame, and so I think that this is going to be a pretty hard one. But you see guys like Samuel Omosigho and Jackson Arnold out there actively recruiting Peyton Bowen almost daily, and yeah, I mean it's hard to get a read on him. You know, he's been on several live streams. People have asked him the questions. He says he's sticking to Notre Dame. He loves Notre Dame. It's hard to get that read on Peyton, and I just don't think OU really can wait that long for Peyton's decision, because what's going to happen if you get up to November, December, and Peyton decides, yeah, like, listen, I'm a fully 100% committed to Notre Dame and I'm not flipping. Well, the thing is, with a lot of players locking down their commitments early, that's going to create a problem for OU. And so I definitely think it's got to happen within probably the next month, or else OU's probably going to go out there and grab somebody else. Now, let's just play some hypotheticals here. If OU is to land all 8 of those guys and retain everybody else that they have in this class, as the rankings currently sit, that would give them 28 recruits and a composite score of 310.27. Now, so if you're wondering where that would put OU for the 2023 class, as of right now, that would put them at number 1. Now, we know that's probably not likely, as Alabama currently is sitting with 12 4-stars, 4 5-stars, and 3 3-stars, and they're probably about to get another 5-star in Keon Keeley, so they're definitely going to jump up those rankings. But to put it in perspective, right? The number 1 class last year was Texas A&M at 330, Alabama at 322, Georgia at 318, and then Ohio State at 300. So if you were to go off last year's rankings, that would put OU at number 4 in the total team rankings, potentially knocking at the door for a number 3 spot. And so that's definitely something to watch for OU. I don't know if they're going to go past 28. 28 is a lot of commits. However, that's something that we're going to see out of Brent Venables and this team. They're not going to be hitting that transfer portal a ton. They're going to be taking more guys in these classes than they are out of the transfer portal. So this is going to look a little bit different than the way that Lincoln Riley was recruiting out here at OU. Now, it does look like OU is out of the race with Edric Hill, as Steve Wilfon has just put in a crystal ball to Alabama. I do think OU still has a chance with Caden McDonald. So he is a 4-star defensive tackle out of Seattle, Washington, but Todd Bates has got his hands full, because you're going to have to climb an uphill battle facing, Clemson, Georgia, Texas A&M, Ohio State, Michigan, and Florida. Luckily, right now, you're not having to go up against Alabama there. I think Alabama has their defensive line class at this point. I think they have who they want, assuming that Jordan Renaud commits to them. Now, if Jordan Renaud does not commit there, do they try to make a run at somebody else? I don't know. Do they try to give that spot to somebody else somewhere else on the defense? It's a possibility. But I think Alabama's pretty well got who they want. And Caden McDonald, he would be a great add for OU in this 2023 cycle. I think it's too early to tell. I think Caden McDonald is going to be one of those guys. It's going to go late into the year, which, again, what does it look like at that point, right? Does he potentially commit a little early? I don't know. But again, it does look like a lot of players are trying to close their recruiting and commits early. And so I definitely think that's possible for Caden McDonald as well. He's currently a top 250 player in this class. So, not the most recruited guy in the world, but he is being recruited by all the big dogs, and that is definitely somebody that you want to get as well. So go ahead and let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Where do you guys think that this class is going to end up for the Oklahoma Sooners in 2023?